Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and out on my bench already, as you can see, the top of. I've got my yellow buckets here, a couple of them. We're going to set up a little bit of a production line. There used to be 5 of these. I've since managed to give one box of these away as an adopted batch of worms for a buddy of mine, and I've already got a couple other people lined up that are interested. I've just not gotten around yet to adopting the worms that live in these last 4 bins. These bins have been in service for 132 days. Tomorrow, 133. That's going to be 19. Yeah, because 140 is 20. So tomorrow these systems will have been in service for 19 weeks now, 132 days. And the last feeding 12 days ago was feeding number 25. And what I'm gearing up for as far as feeding number 26 goes is some coffee. So I'm going to be giving each system some coffee and some leaves. These are some really small leaves that I actually run through my sifter so that they're all really small particle matter. And I also wondered if maybe they wouldn't mind getting a little bit of grit, because I think I gave these systems grit when I first built them. And then I probably added a little bit more grit at one point recently when I did more of a robust feeding where I gave them a bunch of bedding, a bunch of this and that. So I think that they're due for a feeding 12 days now. It's been over a month since we actually ran a video on these systems. I've been skipping all the video updates on these systems because people just didn't really seem to enjoy too much when I would run these videos about the worms that live down in these buckets. But once in a while it seems realistic to keep everyone updated on what's going in these systems. And now 12 days since the last feeding, 34 days since the last video, I thought it was timely to get back in here, keep everyone updated on what's going on. So it's just a quick check-in to see how the worms are doing. In the beginning I was checking in every 4th day and dropping some worm chow in. And then I just decided it might be time to kind of get them back into some normal food. So I think I gave them all pumpkin at one point, not too long ago. Then there was another point in time where it seemed like the systems would really benefit from a boost to their bedding, so I came in here and almost doubled the amount of material in these systems by adding a whole bunch of bedding. But it is a little bit of a less taxing schedule to be coming in here at greater intervals to feed, rather than needing to keep to such a tight schedule of feeding them every 4th day. And it does look to me like what we did in here last time might be akin to what we were planning on doing today, which is to come in here with some fresh leaves. In a way, I was imagining that the leaves would be something that the worms would appreciate, since I always kind of treat leaves as sort of the mainstay of most worms as far as their diet goes. The fact that they get kitchen scraps is sort of a bonus as far as I'm concerned. And the other nice thing, I guess, about the leaves is that the leaves not only go in as food, but bedding as well. More frequently as bedding. But here I'm treating it as sort of food/bedding. So the one funny thing was that we added a pumpkin stem to each of these buckets. And look how this huge pumpkin stem is starting to deteriorate. It's really fragmenting. Down here at the very base of it, perhaps not so much, but at the very top of it, it's starting to really come apart down here in the worm bin. And in all these little nooks and crannies of the pumpkin stem, you could see the worms really liking to get into those features and drop in their castings. And I would assume that they're probably also getting in between the delaminating fragments of the material too. I assume. Is that a worm I see in there? Yeah, a little tiny worm in there. Right there on my thumb. Is he visible? I don't know. My camera can't focus that close. So, you know what? Let me just set this aside with that little piece of top covering paper, just so we don't have as much material in our way when we come in here to look around. I think I'm just going to take a lot of this huge bedding boost that we added a few feedings back, which was just a bunch of my prepared bedding, shredded paper, cardboard mix. as well as that leafy material that came in here probably the last time, judging from its appearance. I like the idea of sort of blending some of this stuff from previous check-ins in, and then we'll come in with today's fresh application of stuff. But it's not just a matter of blending in the old stuff, it's also giving us the opportunity to just gauge how things are doing in here. And it does seem like there's very little bedding remaining in here anymore. It seems like the worms are doing a heck of a job working the material in this system down to castings. And well, you know, after 19 weeks, or well, tomorrow's going to be 19 weeks, but for all intents and purposes, this system's been in service for 19 weeks. 132 days, the system's doing quite nice. In the very beginning, these systems were swamped. I just went way overboard on adding moisture. So much so that I had to actually come in here and ladle the moisture out. So I was able to like sort of tip everything over and push the material to one side and let the moisture pool down on the other side, and then I was able to actually come in with a cup and scoop a lot of moisture out of these systems. So I don't even think that the worms really minded. In the very beginning, I bet you they were actually quite enjoying it, having that much moisture at their disposal. But then ever since then, the systems have been much more routine as far as the moisture content and feedings. Although in the very beginning, I was just coming in here every fourth day to give them a little sprinkling of worm chow. I figured, you know what, let's try to start getting them back to a more average feeding sort of setup, where we give them a little bit of bedding material, a little bit of food material. Here the leaves are going in as sort of bedding slash food. The coffee is really just coming in as basically food. And maybe we can even give them a little bit more leafy material. For some reason, I always like to sort of blend stuff in with the coffee, possibly making it a little bit more interesting for them. The coffee is a little bit damp. Leaves are completely dry. But I think we're in good shape as far as moisture goes in here. So I'm not too worried about adding dry leaves, since the moisture in the coffee should compensate for it. And the moisture in the system in general feels quite nice too. So I think we're in good shape here. I guess kind of like I do in some of my worm composting systems when I'm preparing videos and coming into feed after a while. Sometimes I'll spend a little bit more time in bin number 1, like we did here today in bin number 1. But I think we might be able to pick up the pace now that we kind of have a sense of what to expect. I'll admit, I didn't really remember how we had plopped in all those leaves. I don't even remember what I fed last time. And I shouldn't say we, because I did come in here solo during the last few feedings. So our last feeding in here together to make a video was a few feedings ago. So the last time I prepared a video, there was a 10-day interval, then there was a 12-day interval, and now there's been another 12-day interval. So there were a couple feedings that came up here where you guys haven't been privy to what was going on. So I guess here we're also sort of getting you guys caught up. So on to bucket number 2. I'm just going to get bucket number 1 out of my way here so I have easier access to a little bit of table space and the supplies I need over here to get this feeding taken care of. These top coverings are holding up quite nicely, quite surprising as a matter of fact. A lot of times when I've got a plastic covering, the moisture recirculating under the plastic dampens the paper to the point where the worms just can't seem to resist coming up to nibble on it. But here it seems like we've been sufficiently generous with the bedding down in the bin, between the addition of all the paper shreds and cardboard shreds, and in addition to the leaves they got last time. And here too, it seems like they got some sort of a piece of newspaper for some reason here. So I was wondering if that might have actually just been part of the top covering newspaper that sort of ended up down in the bin for whatever reason. I don't remember seeing something like this floating around down in the other system in bucket number 1. Well, you know, let's just leave it. It's fine. I'm not like aiming for any sort of major consistency in all these systems, although when I'm running systems in this way where they're all launched on the same day, and they are all getting the same feedings on the same feeding schedule and everything. I do prefer to maintain consistency, because then I could use any deviation that I see from bin to bin as, you know, sort of a telltale of something that might just be going awry in one of the systems. Here's the pumpkin stem that this system got. Not quite as big. Bucket number 1 got the largest of all the systems. And oh yeah, I forgot, there was also a stem. Each system got either a grape stem or a tomato stem. And I don't remember seeing the stem, or the grape or tomato stem, in bucket number 1. We might have just breezed right by it. So let's just continue a little bit here with just sort of tilling through and blending in the materials that are in here from previous check-ins. Oh, look at this, another piece of pumpkin stem. I guess I did actually load multiple pumpkin stems into a couple of the buckets. And this must be one of them that got more than just one pumpkin stem. I figured since bucket number 1 was getting such a huge pumpkin stem, let's compensate in the systems that are getting ones that are not quite as big by giving them 2. Okay, nice looking system here too. Just the stick, I guess, must have come in with the leaves or whatever. Once again, we're just going to be sprinkling in some nice leafy material. I guess after we put in a little bit of coffee, we'll see how we feel about maybe blending in even more leafy material. Here I think we might have given a good, nice ratio. Nice blend there that I think they're going to appreciate. Sometimes I wonder if that stuff has the potential to heat up. It seems like such a small quantity of material, but I don't know. In a system this small, if that stuff were to heat up right there dead center in the whole environment, they don't really have a whole lot of room to get away from it. So hopefully I'm not creating the potential for a uncomfortable space here. So I just opened up the hole again because I kind of forgot to return these objects. I don't know, to me it just seemed like an interesting idea to come in here with some of those large objects to give the worms a little extra something other than just the same old boring stuff that they were getting, because in the beginning it was just a kind of a fresh setup of bedding materials and then nothing but worm chow, feeding after feeding after feeding. So when I finally came in here with some pumpkin for them, I figured, hey, why not give them a bunch of pumpkin stems too? And well, besides that, I had a whole bunch of pumpkin stems piling up that I just needed to get rid of anyway, so. Okay, on to bucket number 3. Here, okay. That was a somewhat larger chunk of plastic, one that goes a little bit further out to the edges, possibly creating a greater amount of moisture. And here it seems like our top covering newspaper just hasn't really survived. I mean, is it worth taking those couple little fragments out just to put them back in as sort of a top covering, or at this point maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to continue with top covering newspapers, although I could always at the very end grab a little chunk of newspaper to put it out there for consistency's sake so that they also have something to play around in up on the top surface under the plastic. But by having that slightly larger plastic bag, it does seem like there is a greater quantity of moisture collecting on the surface, or at least on a greater area on the surface. And possibly because of that, causing a little bit more worm traffic, and as a result of that, a greater deal of, decomposition of the top covering newspaper, which I guess at this point is pretty much toast. So here, once again, a couple pumpkin stems, puny ones relative to what we saw in bucket number 1. It's so interesting, like when it seems like they've kind of made their way down into the stem, you know? Sometimes I like to give the stem a little squeeze just to see how it feels. Is it softening up? Is it breaking down? The surface of it down here, this star-shaped end of it that connects to the pumpkin itself, usually seems a lot tougher and stronger, but the top part of it that connects to the vine is usually a little bit more soft and fragile and has a greater tendency to break down more quickly than the rest. Let's see how things look down here in this system that has the slightly larger plastic covering than all the others. Perhaps it just has that slightly greater edge on hanging on to its moisture better than the other systems due to that larger piece of plastic. Although, you know, with these deep containers, it seems like they guard against any sort of like cross breeze. Not that there's any breeze down here in my basement, but I guess just airflow in general. Perhaps there's like a greater sort of moisture zone above the material within the system, and a better sort of ability to guard against the loss of moisture to evaporation. But I guess I might have to say that, yeah, it does seem to me like perhaps stuff down here is a little bit more damp than we saw in buckets number 1 and number 2. Maybe it's due to the slightly larger plastic covering. I can't say for sure, but it seems like a realistic possible explanation for it. So now perhaps this time, before we forget like we did before, maybe this time we'll just drop in the large objects first and then come in with the feeding. I guess that's just going to interfere a little bit with my ability to blend it together. Whatever. We'll figure something out here, right? It also does feel to me like maybe bucket number 1 got more coffee. I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. We're not doing rocket science. Precision's not all that important. In comes a little bit of grit for them too. And we're almost set to continue on to the last bucket, bucket number 4. I'm gonna have to check in with my buddy to see how the worms in bucket number 5 are doing. Well, I've gotten bucket number 5 back, so he moved the worms into a container of his own so that I can get bucket number 5 back. But I'm just curious to see how he's doing with those worms, because I haven't heard from him in a few days. So, on to the last one to be fed. Bucket number 4. I gotta admit, I did contemplate coming in here with some sort of more juicy, kind of more fruity sort of vegetable matter or fruit or something, you know, maybe some banana peels or maybe some carrot peels or something, but then I realized I was starting to run pretty high on coffee that needed to be done away with, so I figured, you know what, let's just go with the coffee. Alright, somewhere down here we should encounter leftovers from the last feeding, and that's what those leaves would be. Kind of makes me wonder, maybe leaves were the entirety of the last feeding. Maybe I just figured leaves would be the meal of the last feeding, because either it's that or they just did away with whatever it was that they were given last time, leaving no leftovers. But it is quite possible that maybe I just chose to make leaves the entire meal last time. I didn't have video in almost every other system that I have where there's worms living in it. I almost always have a video record of what I did to help refresh my memory on what I did. And in the case of these bins, we kind of made the conscious decision to skip video updates for the most part, and maybe just once in a while peek our camera down in here to see how things are coming along. And I'm okay with that. I'm pretty sure people don't need to see a complete play-by-play development of how things are happening in the systems. But it is true that in all my other systems, every feeding is documented with a video, and I do admit that it is kind of nice to have that on hand, since I usually don't remember what I did the last check-in, so I usually give myself a quick refresher review of the previous check-in to see what I fed them and how things looked and stuff like that. But I was really having absolutely no recollection of how the last check-in went in here, so I was curious to see how things are doing, and I'm glad to see that things are doing quite nicely. Alrighty, Usually I just don't even bother with such tiny leafy material. Usually I just go to the leaf collection bags that I've got sitting outside and pile in my pile leaves into my bags. I mean, not bags, the box that I usually use. But these leaf fragments I collected when I was trying to come up with some nice finer material. And I came up with a few of those plastic containers of this stuff, so I have quite a bit of this on hand. I use this stuff when I'm preparing my my shredded paper, cardboard, and leaf mixture bedding, my prepared bedding that also gets dampened before it gets put aside in preparation for future use so that it can kind of age and soften and get primed. Oh, did I want to also throw a little grit in, or did I already? Whatever. I'm sitting here busy talking, I can't even keep track of what I did. But yeah, but I've got so much of that stuff, and I could always whip up a little bit more. Just take my screen outside and screen down a little bit more, and oh geez, we just blended in our top covering newspaper here too. Oh well, I guess buckets number 1 and 2 still have little fragments of top covering newspaper. Buckets 3 and 4 do not. And that's perfectly okay. All right, everyone, that's it for our check-in with the now 132-day-old. I called them breeder buckets in the beginning. I don't even know if they're really being successful in that. If I had maybe gone with a little bit more material in the beginning, maybe we would have had better luck than that. But I tell you, I think I had an estimated 200 or 250 worms loaded into each of these buckets when I first started, and whether I've got more now, I don't know for sure. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think we still have the amount that we launched off into these bins originally? I don't even remember if I shared that in the beginning, so maybe you don't even have an eyewitness recollection of it. Gosh, talk about recollection. If it's not written down, I'm not remembering it, it seems, in my old age. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.